Welcome back to Single Mom Mini Stories That Heal. If our stories speak to you, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. What would you do if a complete stranger wrote down your name as their baby's emergency contact? That question hit Alexander Hayes like a live wire the night everything in his meticulously ordered life shifted. One moment, he was the untouchable CEO of Hayes Global, skimming quarterly forecasts in his glass-walled office on the 50th floor. The city glowed beneath him, numbers lined up exactly where he liked them. Then his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He almost let it go to voicemail, until the voice on the other end said something that did not belong in his world. "Mr. Hayes, you're listed as the emergency contact for an infant named Lily Bennett. The child is at Manhattan General with a dangerously high fever. We need you here immediately." Alexander went rigid. His pen halted above the report. "That's impossible," he said. "I don't know anyone with a baby by that name. You must have the wrong person." But the hospital staff was firm. The mother, Grace Bennett, had put his name down. She wasn't answering her phone. Grace Bennett. The name echoed. He'd seen her 2 weeks earlier. She'd walked into Hayes Global for an interview. Sneakers, a fraying canvas bag, hands twisting in her lap. Nerves radiated off her even as she tried to sound confident. Alexander had written her off within minutes. Too timid, too green. He wanted excellence, not charity cases. By the time she'd left the building, he'd forgotten her. Now her name was back, forcing its way into his life. Within the hour, his black sedan slid to a stop in front of Manhattan General. Alexander strode into the pediatric ward. Armani shoes snapping against the linoleum, mind crackling with suspicion. Was this some elaborate scam? A shakedown? "Mr. Hayes." A nurse hurried over and led him down a bright hallway. "The baby is in here." He stepped into a small room and stopped. A tiny baby girl lay in the crib, wired to monitors. Her cheeks were burning red. Her breath shallow and uneven. "She's stabilized," a doctor said gently, approaching with a clipboard. "But we need more tests." "Thank you for coming so quickly." "There's been a mistake," Alexander cut in, his tone edged with steel. "I don't know this child or her mother." The doctor frowned. "She listed you as her only emergency contact. Do you have any other way to reach her?" Alexander hesitated, jaw locking. "Human resources at my company has her information." Minutes later he had an address. Every instinct told him to walk away. Let the system handle it. Instead, he found himself in Queens, standing in a dim hallway outside a peeling apartment door. No answer. A door next to him creaked open and an elderly neighbor peered out. "You looking for Grace?" "Yes," Alexander replied, voice clipped. "Poor girl collapsed at the diner where she works. Ambulance took her to Queens Memorial. They said she's real sick." The ground seemed to tilt. Grace in the hospital. Her baby alone. "Driver," he barked as he spun around. "Queens Memorial. Now." It took charm, influence, and a few thinly disguised threats before the doctors finally relented. Grace had been admitted with severe pneumonia. She'd kept working double shifts while sick until her body quit. "She's been asking about her daughter," the physician said quietly. "But she's too weak to see her." Alexander's jaw flexed. "Transfer her to Manhattan General. Near the baby." "That's not standard procedure." "I'll cover every cost," he snapped. "Make it happen." Back at Manhattan General, Alexander returned to Lily's crib. A nurse approached. "Would you like to hold her?" He almost refused, but before he could get the word out, she was in his arms. She was impossibly small, fragile, warm. Her wide blue eyes fluttered open and fixed on his face, innocent and unafraid. And something deep inside him shifted, something he'd buried long ago. "She's responding well," the nurse murmured. Alexander swallowed. When he spoke, his voice came out rough, unfamiliar. "Your mother's on her way," he whispered to Lily. "She's sick, but she's coming." For the first time in his life, Alexander Hayes, the man who prized control above everything, felt something he couldn't analyze, categorize, or dismiss. When Grace Bennett finally surfaced from the fog of fever, her chest rose in shallow pulls beneath the oxygen mask. She blinked, focused, and froze. Alexander Hayes sat in a chair beside her bed. The same man who had waved her out of his office 2 weeks ago without a second thought. Her voice was a rasp. My baby. Where's Lily? She's here. She's safe. Alexander leaned in, tone steady, almost commanding. The doctors say she's improving. Relief washed over her tired features, but exhaustion dragged at her. Why? She managed. Why are you here? His gaze was sharp, almost accusatory. That's what I want to know. Of all people, why write my name down as your emergency contact? Her lips trembled. Tears gathered. Because I didn't have anyone else. The confession hung between them, heavy and inescapable. For a man who lived by control and distance, her raw honesty landed like a punch. My parents died in a car crash, she whispered, eyes bright with unshed tears. No siblings. No close friends in New York. I couldn't leave that line on the hospital form blank. It felt like daring the universe to hurt us. So I wrote your name. A broken, breathless laugh escaped her. You looked like someone who could handle a crisis. I never thought they'd actually call you. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Alexander studied her. Pale, exhausted but unflinchingly sincere. No manipulación. No ángel. Just a young woman being crushed under too much weight. That's quite a risk, he said quietly. Trusting a stranger with your child. Grace's eyes drifted closed again, her voice a thin thread. Sometimes strangers are safer than the people who are supposed to care. Her words unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Contracts, numbers, predictable outcomes, that was his universe. There was nothing predictable about Grace Bennett or the feverish child he'd just held. When the doctors explained she would need several more days to recover, Alexander didn't hesitate. I'll help you, he said, matter of fact. Her eyes opened, clouded now with suspicion as well as fatigue. Why? Out of pity. No, his answer came fast, sharper than intended. Consider it a business arrangement. Her brows knit. What kind of arrangement? You need time to heal. I need an assistant who isn't afraid to take initiative. His mouth twitched in a dry, ironic smile. Writing the CEO of a Fortune 500 company as your baby's emergency contact? That certainly qualifies. You rejected me 2 weeks ago, she whispered.
I'm reconsidering.
He rose and smoothed his suit jacket. Rest. We'll go over the details later. 3 days later, when Grace was discharged, Alexander was waiting outside Manhattan General beside his sleek black sedan. A brand new car seat was already locked into the back. Grace hugged Lily against her chest, frowning. What is all this? Your ride, Alexander said smoothly. And a temporary apartment while you recover. 2 bedrooms fully furnished. It's a Hayes Global property that's been sitting empty. Her spine stiffened. I can't accept that. The job offer is still on the table, he said, cutting through her protest. Executive assistant. You start as soon as your doctor clears you. The apartment comes with the position. There's a childcare center in the building. Her voice wavered. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. For once, words didn't come easily to him. At last he said, think of it as an investment in potential. His tone softened grudgingly. Unless you'd rather take the subway home with a newborn, while you're still recovering from pneumonia. Grace stared at him, caught between distrust and something that felt dangerously like hope. Then, for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. Small, shaky, but real. She let him help her into the car. The apartment was beyond anything she'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Clean, modern furnishings. A second bedroom with a crib already assembled. Diapers stacked neatly. Tiny clothes folded in drawers. Her throat closed up. How did you know what to buy? She asked. I didn't, Alexander admitted, awkward, shifting Lily in his arms. My assistant handled it. Grace wandered from room to room in a daze. After months of scraping by, every detail felt unreal. There's food in the fridge, Alexander said, watching her carefully. The doorman has my number. If you need anything, call. He paused at the door, his voice lower now. One thing I don't understand. Where's Lily's father? Grace's expression hardened instantly. Not in the picture. Will he cause problems if he finds out about any of this? He won't. Her tone brooked no questions. Alexander studied her a heartbeat longer, then nodded. But her certainty unsettled him. For all his power and planning, he couldn't shake the sense that this was only the quiet before a much bigger storm. The first crack didn't come from the hospitals or the whispers. It came from a photograph. A grainy tabloid shot. Alexander Hayes stepping out of Grace's new building in Murray Hill, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, Lily cradled against his chest, her knit cap tipped over one eyebrow. The headline did the rest. Hayes Global CEO's secret baby. Who is the woman in Murray Hill? The story spread in hours. Hashtags speculation. Poison dressed up as curiosity. Comment threads swarmed. Someone even posted a blurry elevator selfie. Pretty sure I just saw the mystery mom. Grace woke to 34 unread messages and a rising dread that made her stomach pitch. She clutched Lily closer and stared at the screen. The article had already identified the building. Even the floor. Her phone rang. Diane, Alexander's relentlessly efficient assistant. He's seen it, Diane said without preamble. He's in the boardroom. Don't open your door for anyone you don't know. Is he okay? Grace asked, hating how small she sounded. He's furious, Diane replied. But not at you. Grace paced the living room. Lily pressed to her shoulder, mind racing. New job. New life. She'd expected pushback. But this was a tidal wave. And she and her baby had only a flimsy umbrella. At 8:07 a.m., her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Found you. Her stomach dropped. No name. No need. Derek Harrington. She'd moved twice. Changed numbers. Wiped her social media. Still, he'd found her. Men like Derek never ran out of ladders. Or money. The intercom buzzed. Grace's heart slammed against her ribs. She jabbed the button with a shaking finger. Yes. Building security, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Hayes asked us to check in. Are you expecting a visitor named Harrington? Her voice caught. No copy. He's in the lobby arguing with the desk captain. Says he's here for his daughter. We're holding him downstairs. The room swayed. Lily whimpered, sensing her mother's fear. Grace didn't think. She moved. She dialed Alexander. He picked up on the first ring, voice cool, velvet edged with something harder. Say the word and I'm there. Derek's downstairs, she whispered. He says he wants Lily. Silence sharp as a blade. Then, lock the door. I'm 5 minutes out. The line went dead. Grace stood still. The ticking clock seemed to scrape at her skin. She laid Lily gently in the crib, hands trembling. Her brain clawed for solutions. Lawyers she couldn't pay. Miracles she didn't believe in. Her gaze snagged on the photo she'd taken the night before. Lily asleep on Alexander's chest, his head tipped back against the sofa, the Manhattan skyline a blur of light behind them. You're not alone, she whispered to herself, even as fear gnawed at her edges. The lock turned. Alexander stepped in, tie gone, sleeves shoved to his forearms, carrying the storm like it belonged to him. Security will keep him downstairs for now, he said, eyes going first to Lily, then to Grace. Are you okay? She nodded, then shook her head. He'll get a court order. He said he would. His features hardened, the icily precise look of the man who'd sunk rival companies without blinking. Then we move first. How? Grace's breath hitched. He has money, lawyers, judges who golf with his father. We have truth, Alexander cut in. And leverage. Her eyes widened. Leverage. His jaw tightened. I should have told you sooner. Years ago, Harrington Capital destroyed my father's company. A market squeeze.
Corruption.
I learned how they play. And I kept proof. Grace's hands curled into fists. And you still have it? Always, he said flatly. His phone buzzed. He checked the screen. Security confirms Derek's with a lawyer. They're waving documents but nothing signed by any judge I trust. We have a window. His gaze locked onto hers. Do you trust me? She thought of Lily's fever and Alexander whispering to a child who wasn't his. The crib that appeared without being asked. The stocked fridge. The way he listened. Yes, she said, surprising herself with how easily it came. Ido. Then here's the plan. He was already in motion. 1. My attorneys file for protective custody before Derek can. 2. We control the narrative, no more letting tabloids define us. 3. We gather evidence. If he wants the title of father, he can claim it under oath. He called Diane. His tone shifted into pure command. Get Kincaid on a petition in 30 minutes. Protective custody. Cite threats, stalking, attempted interference with a minor. Full stop. Then call Shelby in PR. I want a draft statement in an hour. Nothing goes out without my approval. He hung up, jaw set. Grace's phone chimed again. A new article. New twist. Hayes family ruined by Bennett bankruptcy. ISIO's good deed a long con? The story dug into a 20-year-old collapse. A company led by Franklin Bennett, Grace's grandfather. A man she'd never met. Her heart lurched. It's not true. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know any of this. I believe you, Alexander said calmly. But the press, you're bored, they'll say you targeted me. They can say whatever they like. His voice stayed even, but danger pulsed beneath it. Truth isn't decided by a vote. He skimmed the article, eyes narrowing. This stinks of Harrington money. And the timing? Same morning Derek shows up? Not a coincidence. Grace wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. This used to work. They'd smear me until I broke. Until I ran. Not anymore. His voice was steel. We don't run. A knock cut through the room. 3 sharp taps. Grace jumped. Alexander was already at the door. Diane, he said, opening it. She swept in, leather folio in hand. Kincaid's filing now. PR is working on language. But her voice dropped. The Harringtons are in the lobby again. Derek brought his father. Grace's pulse spiked. Edmund Harrington? Diane nodded grimly. And a new lawyer. Older. Meaner. Alexander's mouth curved into a smile without warmth. Good. Let them climb the hill. He turned to Grace. You don't have to be there for this. Her knees shook, but her resolve didn't. I want to be. I'm done letting other people tell my story. They rode the elevator down together. Alexander, Grace, Diane, and Lily blinking from her carrier. Big eyes taking in the world. The lobby gleamed, all chrome and glass. Security stood ready. At the center waited Edmund Harrington, immaculate in a tailored suit. Derek fidgeted beside him, coiled like a snake. Mr. Hayes, Edmund said smoothly. We're here to collect my granddaughter. You are obstructing a father's rights. Alexander didn't blink. No order's been served. No paternity established. You're not taking anyone anywhere. Derek's smile flashed, all venom. You can posture or you can cooperate. Either way, a judge will hear our petition by noon. Let's not humiliate your guest. His gaze slid to Grace, dripping contempt. Grace straightened, voice unsteady but clear. Lily isn't a bargaining chip. Edmund barely acknowledged her. Ms. Bennett, your family's financial history is well documented. Perhaps we should move this discussion to... Alexander tapped his watch. A sharp beep cut through the air. We're recording, he said, almost pleasant. In case counsel wants to review how you attempt to dodge due process. Edmund's nostrils flared. Derek sneered. You think a recording scares me? No, Alexander replied softly. But prison might. He set a folder on the nearby table. Wire transfers. Shell accounts. Cayman entities tied to Harrington Capital. A slush fund for creative lobbying. Federal investigators would love a guided tour. For the first time, Edmund's composure cracked. Derek hissed. Bluff. Open it, Alexander invited. They didn't. The air throbbed with tension. Grace, clutching Lily's carrier, realized that for the first time in years she wasn't the only thing standing between her child and the storm. Silence stretched until Edmund finally smoothed his tie, voice cool and poisonous. We'll revisit this with counsel. Come, Derek. Now. Derek bristled. Father. Now. The Harringtons swept out with their lawyer. Grace's knees buckled with relief, and Alexander's hand closed around her elbow, steadying her. Breathe, he murmured. She let out a shaky laugh. That was terrifying. That was only round one, Alexander said grimly. They'll be back with a judge, a headline, or something worse. We need to be ready. How? Grace asked, hugging Lily closer. By taking away their favorite weapon, he said. We go public. Our terms. Our truth. They want chaos. We give them facts. Her heart pounded. And if the facts aren't enough? His gaze softened on her, and on the baby tucked against her chest. Then we fight harder. That night, the Hayes Global boardroom turned into a battleground. Directors demanded answers. The Harringtons circled like sharks, armed with whispers of bankruptcy, family scandal, ulterior motives. Grace sat at the long polished table, Lily sleeping in her stroller beside her. Across from them Derek lounged, smug and twitchy. Edmund sat still and cold, every word measured. Their lawyer wore the faint smile of someone who believed she already knew how this ended. Edmund began smoothly. The paternity test will confirm Derek's rights. Given Ms. Bennett's background, it is clear that custody belongs with us. For the child's stability. Grace's stomach knotted, but before she could speak, Alexander leaned forward, voice low and deliberate. Family histories are funny things, he said. They're rarely as spotless as they look. He touched his watch. The same quiet beep. Then Derek's earlier words from the lobby filled the room. The girl's mine. My family's influence will handle the rest. The lawyer's smile faltered. Edmund's eyes snapped to his son, ice forming in their depths. Alexander didn't stop. He slid another folder across the table. Wire transfers. Offshore accounts. Slush funds tied to Harrington Capital. Federal investigators are very interested in shell companies right now. Derek went pale. You're bluffing. Alexander's smile was thin. Test me. The doors opened. Everyone turned as an elderly man walked in, leaning on a cane. His hair was silver, his face weathered, but his eyes were clear. Grace froze. Grandpa. Her voice cracked. I thought you were dead. Richard Bennett's gaze gentled. Not dead, he said softly. Just exiled. I stepped away so your mother could build a life without the Bennett name. But I never stopped watching. And I never stopped keeping proof. Edmund's composure slipped another notch. This is irrelevant. On the contrary, Alexander said. Richard has records, proof that Harrington Capital engineered the collapse that ruined his company. Bribes. Names. Enough to bury your dynasty. The Harrington lawyer blanched. Derek sat rigid, jaw clenched. Alexander leaned back, as calm as if the outcome were already settled. Here's the offer. Derek signs away any claim to Lily. The Harringtons leave Grace alone. In exchange, Richard keeps his records sealed. You break the deal, everything goes public. The silence turned razor sharp. A muscle in Edmund's jaw ticked. Rage flickered, caged behind his eyes. He turned to his son. Sign. Derek's hand shook as he scrawled his name. Grace let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Tears spilled over. For the first time in years, the storm around her went quiet. Later, back at the apartment, Richard cradled Lily and hummed a lullaby Grace had never heard before. You should have known me sooner, he whispered to the baby. I'll spend the rest of my days trying to make up for that. Grace laid a hand over his. All Lily needs is love, she said softly. If you can give her that, you're already forgiven. Across the room, Alexander stood by the window, the city blazing like distant fire behind him. Grace crossed to him, heart thudding. You went to war for us, she said quietly. He shook his head. Not war. Truth. His voice was softer now. You and Lily deserve peace. And I? A rare uncertainty slipped into his eyes. I don't want to go back to who I was before you walked into my office. Her chest tightened. And who were you before? Empty, he said simply. All achievement. No meaning. He reached for her hand, his grip steady. With you and Lily, I see something else. A life. A family. If you'll have me. Her eyes filled again, but she laughed through the tears. That's a lot to say for a man who hasn't even kissed me. A real smile, unguarded, warm, broke across his face. An oversight I intend to correct. Their lips met, tentative at first, then sure. A promise spoken without words. Months later, a different kind of headline made the rounds. Hayes Global launches Family First Initiative LED by Grace Bennett. Business magazines called it revolutionary. On-site childcare, flexible schedules, Generous parental leave modeled by the CEO himself. If anyone noticed Alexander spending his lunch breaks in the daycare, a dark-haired toddler calling him duh as she toddled toward him, they knew better than to print it. Not until the wedding announcements appeared on glossy magazine covers. Because some stories don't belong to tabloids. They belong to the people brave enough to live them. Thank you for staying with this story to the very end. If it meant something to you, tell us in the comments. We really do read them. Share it with someone who loves a good story. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next soul-stirring journey.